Hear Me Out. We've got a book title now that is going to be provocative, but we want people to hear out what we're discussing here today.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, we want to welcome Colin Flaherty, who's a columnist for WorldNet Daily, and he's here to discuss racial issues and his book, White Girl Bleed a Lot. Colin, welcome to the program.
An honor to be here.
What do you, well, Colin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was a reporter for a long time. I thought I kind of gotten out of the reporting racket. And when I was a reporter, I was known for breaking tough stories. Excuse me, fellas. I wrote a story that got a black man out of prison. He was convicted of trying to kill his white girlfriend. So I showed the crime never took place, and I showed that she had falsely accused someone else of the same thing 1 year earlier. That was a big deal. That was on NPR. That was on Court TV, Los Angeles Times. That was a big deal. So I've always liked tough stories. But I thought I was out of the reporting racket. But my brother and I, we're guest hosts at a talk radio station in Wilmington, Delaware. So I was seeing all these stories come over the wire about these mischievous teenagers blowing off some steam in Philadelphia. And it didn't sound right, but I kept reading about them every day. Then I started seeing the videotapes of what the newspapers were describing. And the videotapes were just totally different than what I was reading in the papers. I was what the papers called just teenagers was 1,000 black people rampaging down the streets of South Philadelphia, stopping traffic, going into restaurants, beating people up, stealing things, destroying property. And then I saw this was happening over and over and over. Tons of videos, tons of witnesses, tons of victims, but nobody was talking about it. How it was exponentially out of proportion in one race. And I kept going to people. I was saying to reporters, I said, that looks like a race riot to me. And they would go, Colin, race has nothing to do with that. Well, these are the same reporters who every day write stories about black caucuses, black churches, black colleges, black TV, black radio. Very, very race conscious. They made us the most race conscious country on the planet. But we have this epidemic level of black mob violence and black on white crime. And they look at me and go, Colin, we're colorblind. So that's who I am, and that's why I decided to write the book.
Well, Colin, let me ask you this.
Well, where does the expression come from? White girl bleed a lot.
Well,
that's the title of your book. Go ahead.
Yeah, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 4th of July, 50 to 100 black people go into a convenience store. They loot it on video. Went to a park a few blocks away, beat up a couple of white kids. At one point, a black woman is standing over a white woman. She motions to all of her friends to look down at the ground, and she says, white girl bleed a lot. The police did not even take a report of that crime.
Okay. You saw the video?
I saw the video in the book that I have in the book is of the 50 to 100 people at the convenience store, looting it, laughing, stealing, stuff like that.
And we should mention, Colin, that this is also an ebook. When you talk about the video in the book, people can actually can get an ebook and click on links. Is that correct?
Yeah, you click on the links, and the fun thing about the paper edition of the book is that when I'm talking about a certain riot, for example, of black and white violence, you can scan a code in the book with your smartphone, and then all of a sudden you're looking at the riot in your smartphone.
Now, you're talking about talking to Colin Flaherty on the program, Flaherty. But what you've written about here, okay, we hear about black on black violence, especially in inner cities, is a real problem. But that's a lot of that's gang related, I guess, drug related. But you're saying there's a growing problem with is it black youth attacking white people just because they're white? Is that what you're saying?
See, I don't do the mind reading thing, and so that's what everybody wants to know. Like, Kyle, is that racially motivated? I don't know. I mean, we're still talking about what motivated somebody to do something 500 years ago. So I don't do mind reading. What I do is, so every single incident in the book by itself is insignificant, but since most of these crimes, people are not leaving calling cards or leaving confessions or explanations about their motivation. But what I do in the book, hope to do in the book, is show the over and over and over how much of this exists, how much video there is.
How much of what exists? Racial violence?
Yeah, racial violence. Yeah, absolutely, on video, and how it happens over and over and over. And then that's only half the book. Other half is how the newspapers ignore it and deny it and condone it. That's the crazy part of the book.
And the reason for that, you think, is because, this gets emotional and it gets complicated and it can strain relationships between people.
Very quickly, sure.
And because you're talking about something that's the reason is it's the history of our country. The way that black people were held in slavery, and then they were denied civil rights, and they were treated as third-class citizens for so long. So you have a lot of white guilt, let's be honest, as we've tried to work through this, especially the last 40 years, to level the playing field for black Americans. And so white people are sensitive to being called, they don't, we want to feel like we moved past those things.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to even bring up the possibility of maybe in some regards, the tables have been turned here, that there's black racial violence now growing, becoming epidemic, but nobody wants to talk about it. I don't know if epidemic's a word you use, Colin. I don't even know but
I use that word.
Okay. Yeah, it's growing, but we don't want to talk about it because it takes us back to those things.
To Bull Connor,
to Bull Connor. Now, I've noticed this, an example of this, Colin. I'm related to, sort of related to your book, and I mentioned this before to people. These home security advertisements that you see on TV.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Every one of them has a white guy breaking into the home. Every one of them, there's a white guy, usually about 25 to 35, in every single one of the ads, and and I'm going, is that true to life?
Statistically,
you telling me we never have a
you
never have a black guy, or you never have a Hispanic guy, breaking into a home? And I go, well, no, the reason they're doing that is because if they put a black fella breaking into a home, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, here they come, you're racially stereotyping people. And I understand the feelings there, but I'm just saying, it seems to me we go overboard sometimes to the point of denying reality so that we're not accused of being racist. So anyway, go ahead, Colin.
You remember the TV show Cops? I mean, it's still on.
I know what you're going to say.
There's a chapter in the book where the producer of Cops is talking about how they consciously distorted the racial makeup of the show because all the material they had was just black criminals. So they had to kind of go out and find Hispanic and white criminals, and they consciously distorted the ratio of of people on the show just so this guy's liberal friends would not be unhappy with him. That's a video of him saying that. So we're not just making this up.
No. That guy, I read that quote. It was the producer of Cops. And he said,
John Langley is his name.
John, he said, I intentionally don't put the ratio of black criminals that's
in terms of the segments they show.
That's true to the statistics, the police statistics, because I don't want to be contributing to a stereotype of a black young man. And I thought that is political correctness. Now, you call it what you want to. When you intentionally deny reality, for what you would call a higher purpose, that is political correctness.
Right.
No one would say, you should put more of a certain race on television, on your show, and present them in this way. Although you're presenting reality, what you're saying is, what do the stats show, man? Is it 50%, 60% black young people doing this, or is it 40% white? I'm just saying,
Yeah.
why don't you just show reality instead of trying to change the perception of people by you call yourself a reality show, Cops,
Right.
and yet you're
Distorting reality.
intentionally distorting reality. Well, Colin, what do we do? What I guess I'm asking you, what is your bottom line point of your book?
Let's start telling the truth about racial violence. The psychiatrists tell us, this speaks to your last point, the psychiatrists tell us we are only as sick as our secrets. And so there's a lot of stuff that's really, really sick that passes off as normal. Mostly, and I'm talking about racial violence, the same thing that the producer of Cops, the same thing that goes through his head, goes through the head of I show how it goes through the head of newspaper editors all over the country and reporters who condone, ignore, excuse, and even deny this racial violence, including a lot of these recent episodes of the knockout game.
The knockout
So
game.
the bottom line is, let's start telling the truth about this.
The other thing is there is the number of men incarcerated is much higher for the African American male than their numbers are in society
Right.
at large. There's no question about that. But to me, the reason for that, it's not that blacks or whites or Oriental or Mexicans or I shouldn't say Mexicans, I should say Hispanics. The DNA, we're all humans.
Right.
We all bleed the same. So there's nothing inherently with the race of a person that would cause them to get involved in criminal activity. I tell you, so you have to say, well, then what is the problem? Why are the numbers higher, for example, in the African American young male population? Because they don't have daddies at home. That's the reason. 73% of African American babies are born out of wedlock. Well, now there are exceptions to that.
Right.
Not all of obviously.
And some single moms do a great job.
But if you play that number out over a period of decades, then and we all know that kids are raised better by a mother and a father in a home, the chances are the chances of them getting involved in bad behavior, criminal activity are far less when you have a stable.
And that's unquestionable scientifically.
Everybody knows that. That's common sense.
Okay, hold on. You know what?
Go ahead.
This is important. You said everybody knows that. Everybody doesn't know that. Right now, if you read any of the black websites, Brio or the Huffington Post, Black Voices, the Washington Post, News One, there's a really huge movement out there that says, listen, what you just said isn't important. Family's not important. Poverty's not important. Education's not important. All this stuff's not important. There's only one reason for this enormous disparity between black people and white people in prisons and educational achievement and income. And that one reason is white racism. It's called critical race theory. White racism is everywhere. White racism is permanent. This is unbelievably popular in schools,
I know
homes,
it is.
and churches. And so everybody knows that. No, not anymore. They don't.
Well, so then let me ask you this in connection with that. You obviously, as a journalist, you did your homework, but let me ask you what probably goes through at least some people's minds. These flash mobs you were talking about earlier, the knockout games. How do you know that? I know one of the accusations against the Drudge Report is that Matt Drudge simply links to examples of blacks doing this to whites. He ignores whites or Hispanics doing that to other people. So how do you know that and how do you know you didn't get sucked into the same thing by only